If you wanted to build, a high-tech, multi-million-dollar automotive assembly plant in Southeast Asia like 5 years ago, Cambodia probably would not have even made your shortlist.
Oh, definitely no.
Right. You would have looked at Vietnam, you would have looked at Thailand, maybe Indonesia, because I feel like the collective imagination of the global business community just had Cambodia frozen in time.
Yeah, completely frozen.
You picture the massive, sprawling garment factories with thousands of workers at sewing machines. Or just the tourism sector, right? Backpackers in Siem Reap, the sunrise over Angkor Wat.
The classic postcards, yeah.
Exactly. It was a country known for low-margin, labor-intensive manufacturing. But if you step off a plane in Phnom Penh today, in 2026, you are walking into a completely different universe.
It's completely unrecognizable from an economic standpoint.
That old image is entirely obsolete. The country is currently absorbing a staggering $10 billion in approved fixed asset investment. But, and here is the paradox we are going to explore today in this deep dive, they are building the physical infrastructure, the industrial parks and the logistics hubs, significantly faster than they can find the executives and the engineers to actually run them.
Right. There is this massive talent vacuum at the top.
Right.
And it is a fascinating bottleneck. But the thing is, it's entirely by design. What we're witnessing is a country actively, and I mean aggressively, rewriting its own economic DNA.
Yeah, they're not just waiting around.
Exactly. This isn't just organic growth. This is a highly structured, deliberate pivot away from basic textiles and toward, electronics, complex regional logistics, high-value manufacturing. But as you pointed out, capital is only half the equation.
You need the people.
Right. You can pour $10 billion into concrete and machinery, but if you don't have the specialized human capital to manage the local execution, those factories just stay dark.
And that is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today. We have taken a massive stack of economic reports, labor market projections, immigration statutes, and cultural analyses, and we've distilled them down to give you, the listener, the absolute inside track.
Because you really need one to navigate this.
You absolutely do, because if you are a professional looking at this market or, an executive trying to figure out where your industry is heading in Southeast Asia, you need to understand how this machinery actually works. So, okay, let's unpack this. We're going to look at the macroeconomic pressure cooker that's forcing this evolution. We'll break down the specific sectors that are hiring, navigate the newly built digital compliance web, and finally, decode the unwritten rules of the Cambodian boardroom.
Which can be a minefield if you aren't prepared.
Oh, a total minefield. Because the reality is, a polished resume and 20 years of Western management experience will not save you if you can't navigate the work permit quota system.
No, it won't. And surviving that legal gauntlet won't matter at all if you inadvertently, insult your local partners in your very first meeting.
Right.
It's a deeply interconnected ecosystem. To succeed in the 2026 market, you really have to understand the macro strategy, the legal architecture, and the cultural psychology simultaneously.
I completely agree. So I want to start wide. Let's look at the raw numbers and the macroeconomic forces, because you really can't understand the job market until you understand the pressure the country is under.
Sure. Let's look at the baseline.
The economy took the same hits as everyone else a few years ago, but it bounced back. We saw an estimated 6% growth in 2024. Now, the Asian Development Bank is projecting 4.5% growth for 2026, rising to 5% in 2027. Steady, solid numbers. But the metric that absolutely jumps off the page from our sources is the foreign direct investment, the FDI. It really is. We are looking at $5.1 billion in actual inflows in 2025. And the approved fixed asset investment projects jumped 45% year on year to that $10 billion figure we mentioned.
Yeah.
Could you break down what fixed asset actually means in this context? Because this isn't just, money floating around in the stock market, is it?
Not at all. And that $10 billion figure is the foundational T to everything else we'll discuss today. When we talk about fixed asset investment here, we're talking about physical, permanent reality.
Like actual buildings.
Exactly. We aren't talking about speculative venture capital flowing into volatile crypto startups or, software companies that could fold tomorrow. We are talking about foreign companies acquiring land, pouring concrete, erecting steel, and installing heavy machinery.
Wow.
Yeah. We're talking about new special economic zones, massive agricultural processing facilities, renewable energy grids, and actual manufacturing plants. And crucially, this investment is no longer just hyper-concentrated in the capital, Phnom Penh.
Right, they're decentralizing the industrial base.
Yes. They're moving out. This physical conversion of capital into production capacity is creating entirely new second-tier industrial centers across the country.
Why specifically?
Places like Bavay, Poipet, Kampong Spot, they're transforming into vital logistical and manufacturing nodes. And all of this physical transformation is the direct result of a government blueprint. It's called the National Industrial Development Policy, or the IDP, for 2026 to 2035.
Our sources highlight this IDP blueprint heavily. It's essentially their master plan to steer the economy away from cheap labor and toward high-tech, skill-driven integration.
That's the goal.
But here's my question. Why the sudden urgency? Why the massive pivot right now? Because for the last 20 years, the garment industry served them incredibly well. They built a massive chunk of their GDP on exporting shirts and shoes.
Yeah.
So why fix what isn't fundamentally broken?
Well, because the environment around them is changing rapidly, and they're facing a major structural shift in global trade mechanics. Cambodia is currently preparing to graduate from least developed country, or LDC, status.
Okay, let's pause and define that, because the word graduation implies like a celebration. You get a diploma, everything is great.
Right. Usually it's a good thing.
But in international economics, graduating from LDC status actually sounds like a terrifying cliff edge for an export-based economy.
It is a profound double-edged sword, truly. Being classified as a least developed country by the UN is a designation based on national income, human assets, economic vulnerability.
Okay.
And because you're vulnerable, wealthier nations like the EU bloc or the United States, they grant you certain structural global trade preferences.
Like the Everything But Arms initiative in Europe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Everything But Arms, or EBA, and the generalized system of preferences in the U.S.
Okay.
Essentially, these wealthy markets allow LDCs to export goods to them with extremely low, or sometimes zero, tariffs. It's a built-in mechanism designed to help developing economies get a foothold in global trade.
So the garment industry in Cambodia thrived almost entirely because of these preferences.
Oh, heavily. A factory in Phnom Penh could manufacture a shipment of jackets and export them to Germany or California cheaper than a factory in a middle-income country, simply because they weren't paying the import taxes at the destination.
So they had an artificial price advantage baked into the system.
Exactly.
But when you grow your economy, when you improve your literacy rates and your national income, the UN eventually says, congratulations, you are no longer a least developed country.
And the moment that happens, those special tariff preferences begin a phase-out process. Suddenly, your cheap exports aren't artificially cheap anymore.
Which means if I'm a buyer for a major European retail brand and Cambodia loses its zero tariff status, I might just move my purchasing orders to Bangladesh or somewhere else that still has LDC status.
Exactly, because the bottom line cost is all that matters for basic t-shirts.
Right.
You're suddenly forced to compete on a completely level playing field. And the Cambodian government and their economic planners, they saw this graduation coming years in advance.
So they had time to prepare.
They did. They looked at the data and realized that if they continue to rely on basic, low-margin goods like textiles, they will be outpriced and outcompeted the minute those tariffs are applied. The only way to survive LDC graduation is to pivot to high-value added production.
So it's adapt or die.
Entirely.
Yeah.
They have to start manufacturing products where the profit margins are inherently larger and where the value of the product comes from the complexity of the engineering rather than just the sheer volume and low cost of the workforce.
That makes total sense. You can absorb a new tariff on an automotive component much easier than you can on a $5 t-shirt.
Exactly, and that is the engine driving the $10 billion in FDI. They are actively forcing the evolution of their industrial base, diversifying into electronics, car tires, bicycle manufacturing, just to ensure they have a profitable export market once those LDC training wheels come off.
That makes the macroeconomic strategy incredibly clear. But there is another catalyst mentioned in the research that I find fascinating because it seems completely counterintuitive at first glance.
The Thai border situation.
Yes. Over the last couple of years, we saw some significant trade disruptions at the Thai border. The result was a 15% drop in bilateral trade, bringing the volume down from roughly $4.3 billion to $3.7 billion in 2025.
Right.
Now, on paper, if you tell me a developing economy just lost 15% of its trade volume with its immediate wealthier neighbor, I would assume that economy's in a crisis. But our sources suggest this disruption actually made Cambodia structurally stronger.
It did.
How does losing hundreds of millions of dollars in trade make you stronger?
It forces an acceleration of self-reliance. I mean, to understand this, we have to look at the historical dynamic. For decades, Cambodia relied very heavily on Thailand for a vast array of imports.
Like what kind of imports?
Oh, everything. Not just luxury goods. I'm talking about foundational materials. Processed foods, consumer packaged goods, basic pharmaceuticals, and crucially, construction materials like cement and steel. Thailand was the easy default supplier.
Right, the supply lines were established, the border was right there, it was just convenient.
But when those border disruptions occurred, whether it was bureaucratic standoffs or temporary closures that massive supply chains suddenly choked, Cambodia experienced a sudden, sharp supply shock.
Ouch.
But the economy didn't collapse. Instead, it triggered a massive wave of what macroeconomists call import substitution.
I want to use an analogy here because I think it perfectly captures what happened. Tell me if this works.
No.
Think of the Cambodian economy as a ship, and for years they were sailing with only one massive bulkhead keeping the water out, and that bulkhead was Thai imports.
Okay, I like this.
It was convenient, but incredibly dangerous if it breached. When the border disruptions happened, it was like a crack in that bulkhead. But instead of sinking, it forced the engineers on the ship to suddenly build 10 new internal bulkheads to redistribute the pressure.
That is a very apt way to look at it, actually, because Cambodian businesses suddenly couldn't rely on getting their cement or their processed food from Thailand. They just had to figure out how to produce it themselves.
Right, because people still needed cement.
Exactly. The demand didn't vanish. The supply just disappeared. So local entrepreneurs and foreign investors stepped in to fill the void. Import substitution literally means substituting foreign imported goods with domestically manufactured alternatives.
This you saw an overnight boom in local industry.
Oh, a massive acceleration. We saw rapid construction of local food processing plants, pharmaceutical packaging facilities, domestic building material production. The pain of the disruption forced the muscle to grow.
Wow.
And for the raw materials they absolutely still had to import, they realized they could never again be held hostage by a single neighbor.
So they diversified their supply chains.
Aggressively. They started building out new logistics routes and sourcing agreements with Vietnam, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, even expanding into the US and Europe. They essentially created a much wider, far more resilient web of trade.
So they took a single point of failure and turned it into a distributed network while simultaneously building up their own domestic manufacturing capacity.
Yes, and when you combine that newfound supply chain resilience with the $10 billion in fixed asset investment, you're looking at an economy that is structurally, fundamentally sounder today than it was before the disruption.
Which brings us to the most critical application for the listener. We have established the macro reality. The factories are being built, the supply chains are diversifying. But, a high-tech tire manufacturing plant or a regional fintech hub cannot be operated by a workforce whose primary experience is in garment sewing.
No, absolutely not.
You need a completely different caliber of human capital. You need supply chain directors, compliance officers, senior software architects. So what does this massive economic metamorphosis mean for the job market you might be looking to enter? Let's dive into the 2026 professional landscape.
It's an exciting landscape.
It really is. The projections from the Ministry of Labor are massive. They anticipate the addition of 445,000 new formal jobs in 2026 alone.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, pushing total employment to over 11 million people.
Sure.
But as we look at these numbers, the sources explicitly warn us not to paint the whole country with a broad brush. They describe the current situation as a dual economy.
Yes, and understanding the dual economy is essential. I mean, if you don't understand this, you might align yourself with the wrong sector entirely and really struggle.
Could you break that down? What does a dual economy look like on the ground? Because 400,000 new jobs sounds like a rising tide that should lift all boats equally.
In theory, sure. In practice, a dual economy means that two very different, almost contradictory economic realities are coexisting within the exact same geographic space.
Okay, so what's on the winning side?
On one side of the divide, you have the export-oriented manufacturing and the formal corporate sectors. This is the side of the economy that is absorbing that $10 billion in FDI. Automotive, electronics, regional logistics. This sector is incredibly resilient, well-capitalized, and expanding at a breakneck pace.
And what is on the other side of the divide?
The informal sector, traditional local retail, and most notably, the domestic real estate and construction markets. Those areas are currently lagging significantly.
Wait, that seems contradictory. We just talked about how much physical infrastructure is being built. How can real estate and construction be lagging while fixed asset investment is booming?
Because the source of the capital is different.
Oh, I see.
The industrial parks and factories are being built with foreign capital, but the local residential and commercial real estate markets, they rely on domestic capital and local borrowing. And right now, Cambodia is going through a period of domestic credit adjustment.
So the local banks are tightening their belts?
Exactly. Following years of rapid, sometimes speculative growth in the property sector, there's been a natural correction. Domestic banks have become much more cautious with their lending.
So liquidity tightens up.
Right. So an international developer building a special economic zone for electronics has all the funding they need from abroad. But a local developer trying to build a residential tower in Phnom Penh is struggling to secure domestic credit.
That is a vital distinction. So if you are an executive or a professional looking to enter the Cambodian market, the strategic takeaway is obvious. You must anchor your career in the internationally backed, export-oriented sector.
Yes, 100%.
Because if you take a role in a purely domestic real estate firm right now, you might find yourself fighting a massive headwind. But if you align with the FDI flow, you are riding the wave.
Precisely. And the data bears this out perfectly. The top hiring sectors right now, where the demand for talent is most acute, are banking and fintech, automotive assembly, logistics and supply chain management, and modern retail, specifically fast-moving consumer goods or FMCG.
Let's talk about compensation, because the salaries reflect this desperation for talent. When a market is experiencing a massive skills gap, the premium for the right people skyrockets.
It really does.
Our sources show that senior developers in the tech and telecom space are commanding base salaries between $1,100 and $1,300 a month. But when you move up the ladder to director-level roles, whether in tech, enterprise solutions, or supply chain, we're seeing salaries hit $5,000 to $6,000 a month.
And we really have to contextualize those figures. In a country where the overall cost of living is still relatively low compared to Western markets or even Singapore or Hong Kong, a monthly salary of $6,000 represents an immense amount of purchasing power.
It's a rapid career accelerator.
It's life-changing money locally, yeah.
But, and this is a massive but, they are not just handing out $6,000 director roles to anyone who shows up with a Western passport and university degree. The days of the expat premium, just for being an expat, are long gone.
Oh, long gone.
There is a highly specific, highly coveted profile that these multinational companies are actively fighting over. We call it the sweet spot. So let's explore this. If I'm building a multi-million-dollar tire manufacturing plant, my first instinct would be to go find an executive who has 25 years of experience running a Michelin plant in France or the U.S.
You're a veteran.
Right, I'd want the gray hair. But our research shows that is not what employers in Cambodia are looking for. The fiercest competition is actually for mid-level professionals who have exactly 3 to 7 years of practical experience. Why cap it at 7? Why don't they want the 30-year veteran?
It is a brilliant question, and the answer lies in the specific operational realities of an emerging market. You have to look at the corporate architecture. When a multinational corporation, let's say a major Japanese automotive firm, sets up a new division in Cambodia, the high-level 10-year strategic vision is not being decided in Phnom Penh.
Right, the big thinking is happening elsewhere.
Exactly. The C-suite strategy, the massive capital allocation, those are all being dictated by the regional headquarters, usually sitting in Singapore, Bangkok, or Tokyo. So what the regional headquarters desperately needs on the ground in Cambodia is not a visionary CEO who wants to reinvent the wheel.
They need someone to just get it done.
They need the execution layer. They need highly competent operators who can take a complex corporate strategy drafted in Singapore and actually make it work on a muddy construction site in Kampong Speu.
Which requires a very specific temperament.
It requires extreme agility. A professional with 3 to 7 years of experience has enough corporate maturity to handle local teams and implement a plan without needing constant hand-holding. They are autonomous, but crucially, they haven't become rigid yet. They're still hungry, they're flexible.
Whereas the 30-year veteran?
The veteran is often accustomed to immense institutional support. They're used to having an IT department, an HR department, highly predictable regulatory environments. When they arrive in a...
We're talking about stakeholder management, communication, and above all else, language fluency. The language premium in the Cambodian job market right now is astronomical.
It truly cannot be overstated. Technical skills are viewed as a prerequisite, a baseline. English fluency is also a baseline. It's universally expected. But if you want to command those premium salaries, you need to be bilingual or trilingual in specific regional languages.
Let's break down which languages and why. I imagine Mandarin is at the top of the list.
Oh, Mandarin Chinese is incredibly highly sought after, and it traces directly back to that $10 billion in FDI. A vast portion of that foreign capital is originating from China.
So if a Chinese conglomerate is building a factory, the senior engineers in the capital are Chinese, but the line workers and the local government officials are Cambodian.
Exactly. And that creates a massive communication chasm. If you are a mid-level manager who can speak fluent English, Mandarin, and ideally Khmer, your value is essentially limitless.
You become the linchpin.
You are the operational linchpin. You're the only person who can accurately translate the technical requirements of the Chinese directors to the Cambodian floor managers, while also reporting compliance metrics back to the English-speaking regional headquarters in Singapore. You just eliminate friction.
And what about other regional languages?
Yeah.
We talked about the supply chain diversification earlier.
Right. Because of that diversification, Thai and Vietnamese language skills have become critical, specifically for logistics and procurement. If a Cambodian factory is sourcing components from Vietnam, a procurement director who speaks Vietnamese can negotiate better rates and build deeper trust.
I really want you, the listener, to completely reframe how you view your own resume if you're targeting this market. Do not imagine your professional profile simply as a static list of software programs you know how to use. That is how you apply for a job in a mature, static market. In a hyper-growth market like Cambodia in 2026, I want you to imagine yourself as a bridge.
A bridge, I like that.
Yeah, the entire economy is trying to connect massive influxes of foreign capital and high-level strategy to local, on-the-ground execution. There's a gap between the money and the reality. You are the bridge. If you have the technical skills, plus 5 years of agile experience, plus you speak English and Mandarin, you are a structurally sound, multi-lane bridge. Companies will pay a massive premium to use you to get their projects across the finish line.
That is a highly accurate visualization. You are selling your ability to connect disparate parts of the ecosystem. However, this is where we have to introduce a massive reality check. Yeah. It is vital to understand that having the perfect resume, speaking 3 languages fluently, and successfully interviewing for a $6,000 director role is literally only half the battle.
Right. You can't just accept the offer, high-five your new boss on Zoom, hop on a plane to Phnom Penh, and log into your laptop on Monday morning.
Not even close. You have to navigate a regulatory environment that has become increasingly rigid and highly digitized. If you, and more importantly, your employer, do not understand the exact sequence of compliance requirements, you will not be working there, period.
Which brings us to a crucial part of this deep dive, the red tape. We're going to master visas, quotas, and digital compliance. Because surviving this process is the literal legal prerequisite to your career. And we are not just going to list visa fees like a travel agency. We need to look at the strategic risk because the system has changed dramatically.
It's completely different now.
Let's start with the foundational architecture. Cambodia uses a strict 2-document system for expat professionals. Document number 1 is the visa. Specifically, the EB Business Visa issued by the Ministry of Interior. This visa gives you the legal right to stay in the country.
Right, stay, not work. Exactly. Document number 2 is the Work Permit and Employment Card, issued by a completely different entity, the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training. The work permit gives you the legal right to actually work and earn an income. You must possess both concurrently.
And the sequence in which you obtain these documents matters immensely. But the most important thing for an executive to understand is that the burden of compliance does not begin with the employee.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Before you even apply for a visa, your employer has to clear a massive, time-sensitive regulatory hurdle. This is the exact point where many foreign professionals get completely tripped up. Your ability to work is entirely dependent on your employer's proactive compliance.
You are talking about the foreign manpower quota.
Yes, the Cambodian government naturally wants to protect jobs for its own citizens. They do not want foreign companies coming in and exclusively hiring expatriates. So they cap the number of foreign workers any company can hire at 10% of their total local Cambodian workforce. Okay, let's look at the mechanics of this. If I'm a company with 50 local Cambodian employees, that means I can hire a maximum of 5 foreign experts. But it's not just a flat 10%, right?
No, it's strictly categorized by skill level. Out of that 10% total quota, 3% can be allocated to office or administrative staff, 6% can be allocated to skilled labor or specialists, and 1% to unskilled labor.
Wow, that's specific.
But the categorization is only half the trap. The critical detail, the mechanism that destroys so many hiring plans, is the timeline.
Okay, lay it out for us.
A company cannot just decide they need to hire a foreign logistics director in June, interview you in July, and apply for a quota spot in August. The system does not allow reactive hiring.
Oh, wow.
The employer must forecast their needs and apply for their foreign manpower quota between September 1st and November 30th of the previous year.
So if a logistics company wants to hire you in June of 2026, they had to have applied for and secured your specific quota slot by the end of November 2025.
Exactly. If they miss that November 30th deadline, they cannot legally hire you the following year.
So you got the $6,000 job offer, but getting into the country is essentially navigating a digital fortress.
Yeah.
I want to replace an old analogy I've heard people use. People used to compare Cambodian bureaucracy to a series of isolated toll booths, right?
Yeah.
You show up, you pay a fee, you get a stamp, move to the next booth.
Right, and the guy at booth 3 has no idea what you did at booth 1.
Exactly. That era is dead.
Awesome.
Today, the Cambodian government has built what is essentially a digital panopticon. Let's walk through the architecture of this fortress. Step 1, the foundation. Your employer has to be perfectly compliant at the corporate level. They must hold a valid patent tax certificate, and they must be legally registered on the Ministry of Commerce's centralized portal called CamDX.
And if your employer's tax status on CamDX blinks red, the entire process stops immediately.
Assuming the company's clean on CamDX, they then have to log into the Ministry of Labor's centralized database, the FWCMS, between September and November to secure that 10% quota. Only after the quota is approved can you, the employee, take action. You apply for a 30-day Type E visa to enter the country. Once you are physically inside Cambodia, you convert that 30-day visa into an EB business extension.
And then comes the final lock on the door. Within 90 days of your physical arrival, your employer must initiate the actual work permit application through that same Ministry of Labor portal.
It's like a highly complex video game level.
It really is. And you must navigate this entire architecture every single year. Work permits expire on December 31st, regardless of what month they were originally issued. And they must be renewed between January 1st and March 31st of the following year.
What happens if someone decides they just don't want to play by these rules? Let's say a startup wants to move fast, they miss the quota deadline, so they just bring a foreign developer in on a tourist visa and pay them under the table.
The digital systems are fully integrated in real time now. The Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Labor, and the Ministry of Interior's immigration databases constantly cross-reference each other.
So they talk to each other.
Constantly. If you go to immigration to renew your EB business visa, they instantly query the Ministry of Labor's database. If they see that you do not have a valid active work permit tied to a compliant company, your visa renewal will be automatically denied.
You are instantly flagged. And the corporate liability is massive too, right?
It's severe. Overstaying a visa costs a flat rate of $10 a day. But working without a valid work permit is a criminal offense. It can lead to an immediate $500 fine, potential imprisonment, and outright deportation with a ban on reentry.
Ouch.
Plus, the company itself faces massive fines and can have its operating licenses suspended. The risk to the business is simply too high to attempt circumventing the system.
I do have a strategic question about that 10% quota, though. Because if we look at the macroeconomic picture we painted earlier, $10 billion in FDI, highly specialized electronics plants. If a foreign conglomerate is building a first-of-its-kind factory, they might genuinely need more than 10% of their staff to be foreign technical experts, simply to train the local workforce.
That's a very real scenario.
If the quota is a hard, inflexible cap, doesn't that inherently stifle the exact high-tech investment the government is trying to attract?
That is an excellent point, and the policymakers recognize that exact friction point. They realized that strict, inflexible quotas could kill specialized FDI. So they created a legal pressure valve, an exception mechanism known as PRACA's 27720.
Okay, how does that work?
If a company genuinely needs to exceed that 10% cap to operate, they can apply for a special exception. However, it's not a rubber stamp process. The employer must submit a detailed written justification explaining exactly why local Cambodian talent cannot fill these specific roles.
So they have to prove they looked locally first.
Yes, they must prove they searched for local talent and came up empty. It is a rigorous process, but it provides the necessary flexibility for highly specialized operations to function legally.
Okay, so let's assume you've navigated the digital panopticon. Your employer is green on CamDX, they secured the quota, you got your EB extension, and your work permit is active. Congratulations. You have survived the legal gauntlet. You legally have a desk in Phnom Penh.
But as any seasoned executive in Southeast Asia will tell you, having a desk and actually succeeding at that desk are two very different disciplines.
Exactly. Which transitions us into the psychology of doing business. Because surviving the legal architecture requires meticulous paperwork, but surviving the Cambodian boardroom requires mastering a completely different set of unwritten, deeply ingrained cultural rules.
Absolutely. If you take a brilliant executive who has spent their entire career in New York or London and you drop them into a management role in Phnom Penh without extensive cultural recalibration, they will almost certainly fail.
Because it's just so different.
It is fundamentally and heavily collectivist. It operates on a completely different psychological wavelength than Western individualism. It prioritizes group harmony above all else, and it is entirely anchored by the concept of face.
We need to drill down deeply into face, because this is a concept that Western professionals frequently misunderstand. A Westerner often hears saving face, and they equate it to simply avoiding embarrassment. But it is so much deeper than that, isn't it?
It is the bedrock of social interaction. Face is not just about embarrassment. It represents a person's intrinsic dignity, their professional reputation, and their exact social standing within the hierarchy of the group. It is, quite literally, their social currency.
Wow.
In a collectivist culture, causing someone to lose face by criticizing them publicly, contradicting them aggressively in a meeting, is not just considered rude. It's viewed as a profound social injury, an act of aggression. If you cause a local partner to lose face, you destroy the trust instantly and often permanently.
I want to provide a concrete scenario for the listener to really illustrate this. Imagine you are a Western executive, newly arrived in Cambodia. You've been deeply trained in modern Silicon Valley management ethos. You believe in a flat corporate structure where titles don't matter. You practice radical candor, the belief that brutal, direct honesty is the fastest way to drive efficiency.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Right. You walk into your new Phnom Penh office on Monday. You call a team meeting. A junior Cambodian employee presents an idea for a new logistics route. You see a flaw in the plan, so you openly critique it right there at the table. You challenge them to defend their idea, to foster vigorous debate. You then end the meeting by telling everyone to drop the formalities and just call you by your first name.
Oh, boy.
From a Western perspective, you just showed that you are an open, analytical, egalitarian leader. How does that meeting actually play out in Cambodia?
That meeting is a total disaster. You have just triggered a cascading failure of social capital.
Break it down for us.
First, by openly critiquing the junior employee's idea in front of the entire team, you have caused them a severe and traumatic loss of face. In their eyes, you didn't analyze a business process, you publicly humiliated them. The result is that this employee will likely shut down completely. They will never offer an original idea again because the risk of public shame is too high.
Wait, let me push back on this as a manager. Doesn't this inherent fear of losing face completely stifle innovation? If I can't foster vigorous debate, how do we ever fix a broken process?
Innovation and problem-solving still happen, but the mechanism is entirely indirect. In Cambodia, you do not solve problems through public confrontation. If an employee is making a mistake, you absolutely address it, but you do it privately.
Behind closed doors.
Exactly. Negative feedback must always be delivered in a one-on-one setting. It must be delivered calmly and without anger. Losing your temper is viewed as a massive loss of face for yourself as a leader. When you give the feedback, you frame it not as a personal failure, but as a gentle suggestion for how modifying a process will help the overall team achieve harmony.
You protect their dignity while correcting the behavior.
Exactly.
Okay, so the critique was the first mistake in my hypothetical meeting. What was the second mistake?
The second massive mistake was demanding a flat structure and discarding your title. By doing that, you violated the inherent top-down hierarchy that structures all of Cambodian society. Decision-making flows from the top down, and authority is deeply respected. When you tell subordinates to treat you as an equal and call you by your first name, you aren't making them feel empowered. You are creating deep confusion and anxiety. They expect you to act as a leader, bearing the responsibility of authority. By discarding your status, you make them feel like the team has no captain.
It's a completely different communication paradigm. Our sources describe this overarching style as indirect communication. And this indirectness heavily dictates how external partnerships function too. For example, the word no is essentially taboo, isn't it?
Yes. A direct, blunt no is incredibly rare in business settings because it's inherently confrontational. If you ask a Cambodian supply chain partner if a tight deadline can be met, and they know for a fact that it is completely impossible, they will almost never say, no, we can't do that.
What do they say instead?
They might smile, hesitate slightly, and say something like, that might be very difficult, or we will try our best. In many cases, they might even say yes, but their tone and body language will be noticeably non-committal.
And a Westerner hears, yes, we will try, and marks it in the spreadsheet as a confirmed commitment.
Exactly, which leads to massive friction later. You have to understand that in this context, yes often does not mean yes, I agree. It simply means yes, I hear the words you are saying. You have to learn to read the context, the hesitations. A very common phrase you will hear when navigating difficult topics is same, but different.
I love that phrase, same, but different. It perfectly encapsulates the required diplomacy. Let's talk about the physical mechanics of this respect, because the protocol is just as important as the verbal communication.
It starts the literal moment you meet someone. The traditional greeting in Cambodia is the sampai. You press your palms together, fingers pointing upward at chest level, and you offer a slight bow of the head.
And there's nuance to how you do it.
Yes, the higher you place your hands moving from the chest to the chin to the nose, and the deeper you bow, the more respect you are conferring. While Western handshakes are becoming more common, taking the time to properly reciprocate the sampai shows immense cultural respect.
And we touched on this briefly, but the honorifics are non-negotiable. You cannot just use first names.
They are absolutely crucial. In a standard professional setting, you should use the honorific Lux for men and Luk Shrey for women, followed immediately by their name, but it escalates based on status.
How so?
If you're dealing with prominent business leaders who have been granted royal titles by the king, which is common at the highest levels, you must address them as Okha. And for high-ranking government officials or ministers, the required title is Ekudum. Ignoring these titles is deeply disrespectful.
Even the simple act of exchanging business cards is a highly choreographed ritual. You can't just casually slide a card across a table with one hand or shove it into your pocket.
Absolutely not. The business card is viewed symbolically as an extension of the person's identity. You must present your card and receive their card using both hands, or at least your right hand supported by your left.
Never just the left hand.
Never the left hand. In Cambodian culture, the left hand is traditionally associated with personal hygiene and is considered culturally unclean. Using your left hand to pass a card or a gift is a severe faux pas. When you receive the card, hold it with both hands, read their title, and place it on the table in front of you for the duration of the meeting.
I want to highlight one more cultural quirk from our research, because this piece of logistical advice could literally save a multi-million-dollar negotiation. It's the concept of the post-lunch power nap.
Oh, yes. This is vital.
If you were a Western executive, you might be used to powering through the day, grabbing a sandwich at your desk, scheduling intense meetings for 1:00 p.m. Do not do that in Cambodia.
It is a deeply ingrained practice for local professionals to take a brief rest or literally sleep for 30 minutes to an hour immediately following lunch. It's a way to escape the intense midday heat and refresh the mind. If you force a heavy negotiation at 1:30 p.m., your local partners will likely be physically sluggish and internally resentful. Schedule your heavy lifting for 9:30 a.m. or 3:40 p.m.
And adapting to that environment extends to how you view your responsibilities as a manager. Our sources describe the ideal Cambodian management style as paternalistic. In the West, if a boss gives overly detailed step-by-step instructions, it's labeled as toxic micromanagement. But in Cambodia, the expectation is flipped, isn't it?
It is entirely flipped. Because of the strict adherence to hierarchy, subordinates will very rarely take unauthorized initiative. They view stepping outside of their defined role as deeply disrespectful to the manager's authority. They will wait for orders.
So they expect detailed directions.
Yes. Managers are expected to provide very clear, highly detailed instructions. What a Western executive might call micromanagement is viewed by a Cambodian employee simply as competent, engaged leadership. If you give vague instructions and tell them to figure it out, They'll feel abandoned.
And the boundary between professional and personal life is much more permeable too, right?
Very much so. Managers are expected to take a genuine, active interest in the well-being of their employees outside of the office. You might be expected to attend their family weddings or offer support during a family illness. You are viewed as a guardian responsible for the stability of your team.
So, we have established that preserving face, maintaining harmony, respecting hierarchy, and adapting to a paternalistic style are the absolute bedrock of the business culture. And because trust is built on these highly nuanced dynamics, you cannot just blast a cold email with a pitch deck to a stranger. Everything is built on warm introductions.
Which brings us perfectly to our final core topic, social capital. In a relationship-based economy like Cambodia's, who you know is the operational engine of your success. Your professional network dictates the speed at which you can move.
Let's map out that network for the listener.
Yeah.
You're a newly arrived executive, you have your work permit, you understand face, but you don't know anyone yet. You need to plug into the right architecture. Our sources highlight several key organizations. First is the Cambodia Chamber of Commerce, the CCC.
The CCC is critical because it's the formalized bridge between the private sector and the government policymakers. They operate the government-private sector forum. If a new transport regulation is causing havoc for your logistics fleet, the CCC is the channel where you can formally advocate for changes.
Then you have the major international chambers. You have Eurochem representing European interests and AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce. Why are these so vital? Is it just about networking mixers?
The mixers are part of it, but joining these chambers is fundamentally about regulatory survival. Think back to the macro picture. Cambodia is pivoting to high-tech manufacturing. They're facing the phase-out of LDC trade preferences. This means the entire regulatory environment is changing rapidly to align with global standards.
Right.
For example, environmental, social, and governance (ESG) compliance is suddenly a massive issue. If a factory wants to export to the EU, they now have to meet incredibly strict European supply chain laws.
And a single factory manager can't possibly interpret all those new EU directives alone.
Exactly. Chambers like Eurochem provide targeted ESG training. They decode complex new tax laws. AmCham has highly influential advocacy committees. By aligning with these chambers, an executive ensures they aren't flying blind.
And on a purely practical level, these chambers provide the architecture for those warm introductions. If I need a reliable local logistics partner, I don't just Google Cambodia trucking companies. I go to an AmCham event, find a member I trust, and ask them for an introduction.
And that introduction is magic. Because the local logistics provider trusts the chamber member and the chamber member trusts you, the trust is instantly transferred. You bypass months of awkward, risky vetting.
I want to drive this point home for you, the listener. In the 2026 Cambodian market, your professional network acts as an unofficial, highly robust insurance policy. When a border disruption hits or when the Ministry of Labor updates the CamDX digital portal and your quota application is stuck, you cannot rely solely on reading government press releases.
No, you really can't.
Your network, the people you have built face with, that is what keeps your business grounded. They are the ones who will broker the warm introduction to the exact official who can unblock your supply chain. Your technical skills get you the job offer, but your social capital is your safety net.
That is the defining characteristic of a successful executive in this market. Your technical expertise dictates your floor, but your social capital dictates your absolute ceiling.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's briefly recap the journey. We started with the macro picture. We saw how LDC graduation and a $10 billion wave of FDI are forcing Cambodia to pivot to high-tech manufacturing.
We identified the dual economy, pinpointed the sweet spot for mid-level professionals, and highlighted the massive premium for bilingual bridges.
We navigated the digital fortress of compliance, the 10% quota, the November deadline, the CamDX portal, and we unlocked the boardroom, breaking down the psychology of face, the Sampay, and the paternalistic management style.
It's an arena that intensely rewards the adaptable executive who can blend technical expertise with deep cultural empathy.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought, something that is quietly reshaping the executive landscape. We spent a lot of time talking about surviving year to year on an EB visa. Officially, permanent residency as it exists in the West does not exist in Cambodia. But there's a fascinating loophole gaining massive traction.
Yes, the CM2H program, Cambodia My Second Home. It's essentially a citizenship by investment initiative. It allows foreign professionals to invest a minimum of $50,000 into government-approved real estate projects.
$50,000. That is an incredibly low barrier to entry for an international investment visa.
It is remarkably accessible. In exchange for that $50,000 investment, the investor is granted a 10-year golden visa. This instantly removes the annual stressful grind of work permit quotas and visa renewals.
It gives you absolute stability.
But much more importantly, holding that CM2H visa and maintaining the investment provides a direct, formalized legal pathway to apply for full Khmer citizenship after 5 years.
Wow. That completely changes the strategic calculus. You aren't just an expat worker anymore.
Precisely. It invites a profound question for anyone looking at this market. If you are going to invest the prime years of your career building this new high-tech Cambodian economy, putting in the grueling work to learn the language and build social capital, might it be worth taking that final permanent step?
Might it be worth investing $50,000 in its soil to transition from a temporary guest into a permanent part of its economic future? That is an incredible thought to chew on. From sweating over a 30-day visa to potentially holding full citizenship and owning the land you are building on.
It's a unique opportunity.
It really is. We started this deep dive talking about a country aggressively rewriting its own economic DNA. It turns out, if you're willing to study the blueprint and play by their rules, you have the opportunity to become a permanent part of that new DNA. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these insights, respect the culture, build those bridges, and good luck on your next big career move.